Right, as Gary says, I'm going to talk about a tool for business change called Pelorus. Now, Gary already, I think when he started, he pointed out that IT projects are difficult and they don't usually succeed, and the same is true for business change projects. The figure that's normally quoted is that fewer than 50% of business change projects are successful, which of course means that more than half of the business change initiatives end in failure. What's worrying is that, excuse me, what's worrying is that number's been the same for the past 15 years or more. We don't seem to be getting any better. Of course, we have to be clear on what we mean by success, and I think I'm echoing Gary reasonably well when I say that for us it's delivering the intended business benefits. So a change initiative that delivers the intended business benefits we regard as a success, and one that doesn't we regard as a failure. But saying intended benefits sort of begs the question of intended by whom, and we think the stakeholders, where a stakeholder is anybody who's affected by the change or can affect the change. So a successful change initiative is one that delivers the benefits intended by its stakeholders. And that leads me nicely to Pelorus, because we describe Pelorus as a benefits-driven and stakeholder-centric method for business change that's supported by simple cloud-based software. And by benefits-driven we mean that attention is focused on the benefits from the outset of the change initiative, and everything that happens within the change initiative is aligned with delivering the intended business benefits. And by stakeholder-centric we mean that it's the stakeholders who own the change. They design the change, they articulate the change, and they deliver their own change, so the stakeholders do it for themselves, kind of thing. A couple of other points that are worth making at the outset. We think Pelorus is a very flexible tool. It can certainly be applied at the level of a change project, an individual project, at the level of a program, at the level of a portfolio, or in formulating and executing business strategy. So it can be applied basically at any level of change. It's a tool for change regardless of the level you're talking about. And the other thing is it's deliberately minimalist. We deliberately kept the method to the absolute minimum that we thought we could get away with. And as you'll see when I go through with the software is also deliberately minimalist. We've tried to keep everything as simple as we possibly can. Now, my next apology is that I'm used to either having a bigger screen or a smaller room. And I'm actually using the software rather than any slides or anything, so I'm afraid that some of it's going to be a bit difficult to read. I'll do my best to read it out. If you can't see something, please shout and I'll try and sort of make the screen slightly bigger or something, but that's a bit awkward. So let's take a look at Pelorus. And the heart of Pelorus is a thing called a map. So everything in Pelorus is these things called maps. And you have one map for each individual change initiative. So if you've got an organisation that has several extant initiatives, then they'll have several maps. As shown here, there's a list of maps that this organisation's got at the moment. And if we look at one of these maps, like, say, call centre redesign, which is the one I'm going to be looking at throughout, then you'll see that it takes the form of a network of boxes connected by arrows. And probably the single most important thing you can know about Pelorus is that these boxes are static states. They're not dynamic activities. Now, most of the established methods for project management, program management, business change focus primarily on the dynamic activities, things that people are planning to do. Pelorus has no explicit notion of a dynamic activity at all. It has only these static states. So the boxes in this map are static states, desirable static states that we're aiming to achieve. And for that reason we call them goals. So basically a Pelorus map is a network of goals. And the structure of a map is that goals support other goals. So achievement of one goal positions you to achieve another goal. It sort of acts as a stepping stone where you say, well, if I can achieve that goal, then that acts as a stepping stone which will allow me to achieve that goal, and so on. So these arrows in the map show that one goal is supporting another. So for example, there's this goal here which is called customer inquiry process redesigned, which I'm going to be focusing on throughout. It's my equivalent of the universal credit, really, is a redesigned customer inquiry process. And there's this goal, customer inquiry process, which is supporting these three goals: new process stabilised, staff reallocated, and business benefits. So that's the basic structure, that goals support the achievement of other goals. They sort of act as stepping stones. And this map sort of illustrates the sort of typical structure of a Pelorus map, where you have the business benefits at the head of the map, the head goals in the map. There might be more than one. We've only got one here, but there might be more than one. The head goals show the business benefits that we're aiming to achieve with this change initiative. And then the body goals, the goals in the body of the map, they show the sort of stepping stones, the chain of stepping stones, which will position us to deliver those business benefits. Okay, and we call these the change paths. So the goals in the body of the map show the change paths, and by following those change paths, we're positioned to actually deliver the business benefits at the head of the map. Okay, everything clear? So good, right? Okay, so we've got this map that consists of a network of goals, and these goals aren't just vague aspirations. These goals are actually quite precisely defined. So if we look at a goal, the one I'm going to focus on primarily, called customer inquiry process redesign. At this point, presumably you people at the back can't even, can you read it at all? Is it? Well, you can. Cool, your eyes are a lot better than mine are in that case. Well done. In that case, I don't have to muck about trying to blow it up and things. Right, there's this goal called customer inquiry process. Oh, I'll go back a minute because I've forgotten to say something. I knew I'd forget to say something. Just so you understand what this map is about. It's a fairly simple map by our standards. What it's about, it's a map of a change within the call centre of an insurance company. And what the change is they're going to re-engineer the customer inquiry process, where most of the call centre staff spend all their time. They spend all their time answering the phone and dealing with customer inquiries. And they're going to re-engineer that process. And by re-engineering that process, they're going to be able to reallocate some of the call centre staff to other jobs within the insurance company. And by so doing, and by having a better process, they're going to be able to deliver various benefits, reduce costs because they've saved costs within the call centre, increase cross-sales of their products, and improve customer satisfaction with the response to their inquiries. And the way that they're going to be enabled to run this re-engineered customer inquiry process is through a new workflow-enabled CRM system. So the CRM system is actually going to guide the operators through the process. I should have said that before, so my apologies. Okay, so as I was saying, these goals, they're not vague aspirations, they're well defined. So if I look at this particular goal, customer inquiry process redesigned, it has a textual description, which can be obviously as long or as short as one wishes. And if the stakeholders choose to do so, they can accept that as being the definition of this goal. They can say, I'm going to write this text quite precisely, and if the stakeholders all agree, then they can say that's the definition of the goal that we're going to work with. But we encourage, and almost invariably we encourage a more precise definition of the goal than simply having a sort of informal textual description. We encourage the textual description to be in the nature of a comment on the goal, and then we encourage a much more precise definition of the goal using these things called factors. Okay, and all a factor is, it's a discrete observable characteristic of the goal. If you remember, a goal is a static state, and you can see that if we achieve a static state and look at it, we can say it has certain characteristics. Okay, and we can observe those characteristics and say, have we actually achieved the state we're after? So, for example, in the case of this goal, customer inquiry process redesigned, we have a factor which is the average time to handle a customer inquiry, which is pretty critical to this improved process, a factor that's called customer assessment of staff helpfulness, a factor of customer satisfaction with inquiry outcome, and so on. Okay? And each factor has a target value that we're aiming to achieve. So the target value for average time to handle a customer inquiry is less than 60 seconds. The target value for customer assessment of staff helpfulness is greater than 95%. And the target values for these other ones and so on. So each of these factors has a defined target value, okay? And in order to achieve the goal, we have to achieve the target value for all these factors simultaneously. We talk about the sort of combination of the factors and their target values as being the goal profile, and basically you have to satisfy the entire goal profile in order to achieve the goal, and that's what we mean by achieving or not achieving a goal, is whether we achieve all these target values simultaneously. And just like a goal is well defined through its constituent factors, so each individual factor is well defined. So if, for example, I look at this factor, average time to handle customer inquiry, again it's got a description, which again is in the nature of a comment, but more importantly it's got a measurement procedure. Now in Pelorus we encourage the use of what are known as operational definitions, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with this notion of operational definition, but it's basically defining things through their measurement procedure. And I won't go into details of that now, but we can talk about that later if someone's interested. So factors, the goals are well defined and their individual factors are well defined. Okay. Right, now you remember I said that the change is owned by its stakeholders. which are all the people who are affected by the change or can affect the change. And in Pelorus, we have stakes in each individual goal. So we don't just have stakeholders in the change as a whole. We have stakeholders at the level of the individual goal. And each goal always has 4 predefined stakeholders. Every goal always has these 4 predefined stakeholders, who are the goal champion, the goal manager, the risk manager, and the change manager. Okay, so every goal always has those 4 stakeholders. And then in addition to that, it has as many other stakes as appropriate for that goal, as many other stakeholders as have been identified for the goal. So for example, in the case of this goal of customer inquiry process redesign, there's the owner of the customer inquiry process, there's the call centre manager, the supervisors in the call centre, the operators in the call centre, the customers of the call centre, who are the customers of the insurance company, obviously. And there might be other stakeholders as well, but those are the ones that have been identified at this stage of developing the map. So each goal has its own stakeholders who own the goal and are responsible for the goal. And what happens in creating a Pelorus map is that basically it's a cooperative process amongst all the stakeholders in the map, and it's a conversational process. So the map is created and delivered by all the stakeholders through a cooperative conversational process. And in those conversations, the map is both the focus of those conversations, because the conversations are revolving around this map, and it's also the tangible expression of the current state and the results of those conversations, if you follow me. So it's the focus for all the stakeholders who are involved in the change. Okay, is that okay? So we've talked a bit about the sort of structure of the Pelorus map and the fact it's a process that's carried out by the stakeholders. What am I doing for time? I'm not too bad. Oh, right, good, okay. Right, so we'll look just briefly then at how a map would be created. So in order to do that, I'll log in over here. Now I know I've already been talking about this call centre redesign map, and I know it's already there, but if for the moment you can imagine that it's not already there, and actually we're stakeholders in the call centre of this insurance company, and we've got an idea that it would be a good idea perhaps to improve the customer inquiry process within our call centre. So that's our idea. So we think, well, we might have a new change initiative here. So if we're using Pelorus, the first thing we do is create a new map for that change initiative, because we always have one map per change initiative. So I shall create a new map, and I'll call it CCR for short, and I'll make me the manager. So I create a map, and I've now got a new map, and of course it's empty, it hasn't got any goals at the moment because I've only just created it, but you'll see I've got the 4 predefined stakes, and in fact the predefined stakes will be inherited by any goals I create at the top level of this map. So normally I would edit those stakes to be the most appropriate people to hold those stakes at the level of the map as a whole, kind of thing, but I won't do that at the moment because I'm short of time, so I won't bother to edit them. So I'll go straight to beginning to populate the map. And when you've created a new map for a potential new change initiative, the first question you ask is what is the sort of central concept of this change, or what is the triggering concept of this change? What led us to think we might have a new change program or new change project? And in the case of this particular change, the triggering idea, the sort of somebody making a good suggestion, was that we could do with vastly improving our customer inquiry process. So what we do then is we create a first goal in the map, which is customer inquiry process redesigned. I won't bother to give it a description, because that's just a comment really. So you create a first goal to capture that sort of triggering concept of the change, and it doesn't matter what the triggering concept of the change was, you just create the first goal which captures that. And then as soon as you have any goals in a map, any goals at all, you repeatedly ask 4 questions about that goal. And you revisit these questions, but you just ask them repeatedly. And the 4 questions are who, and what, and why, and how. So the first question you always ask about any new goal that appears in the map is who. And by asking that question, you begin to identify the stakeholders in the goal. So if I go to the stakeholders, I've got my 4 predefined stakeholders, which were inherited from the level of the map as a whole. But you start to ask, who else is stakeholders in this goal? Of course, you'd edit those to be the most appropriate person to hold that particular stake in this goal. Okay, but you then begin to ask who else is stakeholders in this goal. And for example, one of the stakeholders we'd immediately identify is the call centre manager, because it's centrally involved. and the call centre manager happens to be a chap called Andrew Jannings. So we say, well, Andrew is a stakeholder in this goal. And as soon as you start to add stakeholders, to introduce stakeholders into a goal and into the map, so those stakeholders join in the conversation. They're going to join in asking these questions of who and what and why and how and so on. So we're building up the community of stakeholders in this map who are going to join the conversations. So Andrew will now be joining the conversation about who are the stakeholders in this goal, and it will probably be Andrew who says, well, obviously the supervisors of the call centre, obviously the operators, our customers, obviously, and so on. So, and then when they join in, they will join in the conversations and so on. So, we've asking this question, who, we identify the stakeholders, and we carry on. We revisit this question and we carry on to try and ensure that we've identified all the stakeholders. Full stop. I was going to say all the stakeholders that matter, but all the stakeholders matter, so, until we've identified all the stakeholders. So that's the first question we ask about all goals, is who. The second question we ask, which all the stakeholders ask collaboratively, is what, and that of course leads us to start identifying the factors. So again, one of the factors was average time to handle customer inquiry, I think, and the target for that was less than 60 seconds. So we create a new factor. So by asking the what question, we start to build up the definition of this goal, and we keep asking what, and we keep saying, is this goal defined to the satisfaction of all the stakeholders in the goal? And if it is, then we carry on. If it's not, then we add something or edit something or change something or whatever. So by asking the what question, we define the factors in the goal, and we define the goal as precisely as the stakeholders feel they need to define this particular goal. Then the third question that we ask is why. And asking the why question leads to the identification. You say, why am I interested in achieving this goal? And normally the reason you're interested in achieving a goal is because it's going to act as a stepping stone to allow you to achieve some further goal that you're interested in achieving. So by asking the why question, we identify higher level goals that this particular goal supports. Okay, so one of the things that having this re-engineered customer inquiry process is going to do is it's going to allow us to reallocate some of the staff. So we'll introduce a new goal called staff reallocated, and if we just do this, then we can say the goal we've been looking at, the customer inquiry process redesign goal, supports the staff reallocated goal. Okay, and then at some time we'll start asking the 4 questions about that staff reallocated goal. Okay, and similarly, if we ask the how question, we're asking what do we need to have in place, as it were, to position us to achieve this particular goal that we're looking at the moment, a particular goal that we as stakeholders are responsible for. And that, of course, will lead to the identification of lower level goals that support this particular goal. And I was going to sort of do that, but I don't think I'll bother because that'll take a bit of time. So sort of by going through this process, you sort of gradually grow the map in all directions. You start with this concept goal and you grow the map in all directions, upwards, downwards, sideways, whatever, and you also refine the definition of the map, you refine the definition of the goals through this conversational process amongst all the stakeholders in the map. So you sort of gradually populate the map and build it up. And of course, finally, well, at some time, did that click? Yes, it did. You end up with the map that we were looking at earlier, which is this structure, with all the goals defined through their factors and so on. Okay, so the sort of process of growing the map through these conversations amongst the stakeholders. And as you're doing that, there are several sort of pervasive concerns that the stakeholders should always be aware of which 3 of the important ones are validity and completeness and alignment, for example. And validity, all that means is that it's a sort of valid map of the change that we want to carry out. Okay, so the business benefits are the ones that the stakeholders think they should be aiming to deliver, and benefits they think they might well be positioned to deliver, and then the change paths in the map must represent what the stakeholders feel is a valid way of making a change that will deliver those intended benefits. So that's what we mean by validity. Completeness just means that all the necessary elements of the change must be there. I mean, this map is relatively simple, but in a complex change initiative, it's very easy to overlook critical elements of the change, whatever they might be. It's very easy to overlook them, so we have to have a pervasive concern to do with completeness. And then there's another alignment is simply, do all the body goals of the map, are they all aligned, and do they all pull towards delivery of the business benefits? Okay, and in sort of in taking care of those pervasive concerns, it's very important that the map is expressed solely in terms of static states, okay? Because all the stakeholders have this sort of single, consistent, very straightforward view of the entire change, and they can discuss the change from that perspective, and they can reason about the change from that perspective, and that makes it relatively easy to address these pervasive concerns. Okay, so far we've talked about the sort of the structure of a Pelorus map and how it's created, and it's been a sort of very positive message about, you know, we can achieve these goals, and that will position us to achieve these business benefits, and, you know, everything in the garden's rosy kind of thing. But of course everything in the garden isn't rosy, because all change initiatives entail risks, okay? And we have to look at the risks. So we can't just take this very positive view of, what was it say, optimistic, where our optimism bias is saying this is all going to work like this. We have to worry about the risks. So we have risk management in Pelorus, and there are really only two key things you need to know about risk management in Pelorus. One is that it's integrated into the tool. It's not sort of some adjunct on the side. It's actually integrated in the tool. And the other thing is that we do risk management at the level of the individual goal. We don't do risk management for the entire change initiative. We do it for each individual goal. So with Pelorus risk management, we basically, if we're doing risk management, for example, at the customer inquiry redesign process, which customer inquiry process redesign goal, which is the one we've been focusing on, what you do is you simply assume that the supporting goals of that particular goal deliver as defined. Okay, so the stakeholders in that goal deliver what they're promising to deliver. So in this case, we assume that the goal call centre staff trained and the goal new CRM system is both of those are delivered as promised. And then we ask the question, all right, what could go wrong? What risks might we have that would then prevent us from delivering our goal, assuming that our supporting goals are delivered as they promised to do? And the reason for doing this is that that's a very much more narrow and focused question than the broad question of what could possibly go wrong with this change initiative as a whole. And by focusing on these narrow questions, it makes risk management far easier, because you know, we're much better placed to do risk identification because we're looking at a much narrower context and a very specific context, and we're equally better placed to do risk management. Okay, and beyond those 2 points of it being integrated, and the fact that we do it goal by goal rather than for the initiative as a whole, risk management is entirely conventional. So we deal with probabilities and impacts and severities and avoidance measures and mitigation measures and so on. So it's perfectly conventional, but as I say, it's integrated, and we do it on a goal-by-goal basis rather than for the map as a whole. Okay, so we've looked at the structure of a Pelorus map, we've looked at creating a Pelorus map, we've looked at risk management. At some time or other, we're going to have to look at delivery, because at some time or other, the stakeholders arrive at the stage where they formulated the change sufficiently well to start thinking about delivery. Okay, so if we go back to the map, now the sort of obvious approach to delivering a Pelorus map is sort of bottom up. You know, if you look at it, you say, well, the obvious thing to do is to first deliver what we call the tail goals of the map, the ones that don't have any supporting goals kind of thing, and then you deliver the goals that are supported by those tail goals, and then you deliver the goals further up the map and so on, and finally you get to being able to deliver the business benefits. And that's the obvious way, and that is a way that you can choose to deliver a Pelorus map. That's fine, the stakeholders can do it that way. However, we actually encourage a rather more concurrent approach to delivery, and I think Gary pointed out that you have to design for delivery, and in order to for a more concurrent approach to be feasible, you obviously have to structure the change and structure the map in such a way that some aspect of concurrency is available to you. So basically what we encourage, you remember that each of these goals has its own stakeholders, and the goal is a well-defined state those stakeholders are trying to achieve, and currently we're some way away from having that state, okay, from being in that state. So what we encourage, or what the method encourages, is that the stakeholders in the goal are continuously asking, what can we do to progress towards the state, towards the goal state, not what can we do to finally achieve it once and for all, but can we do things constructively to progress towards that goal state, okay? And that might mean, for example, that they feel able to achieve the target value for just one of the goal's factors, or it might mean that they feel able to progress towards the target values for some of the goals factors or whatever. So at any particular time, regardless of the state of the rest of the map, at any particular time, the stakeholders might well be able to identify actions they can take to progress towards achievement of their goals. And this relates to something that we're very keen on, that Gary also emphasised, which is the sort of the idea of the change being a sort of learning exercise for everybody involved, and you learn incrementally, you learn steadily, and you adjust as necessary in the light of that learning kind of thing. So as I say, the stakeholders will be looking for actions they can undertake to progress towards the goal. Equally, on the risk management side, there will be avoidance measures that stakeholders are going to have to be taking on. If risks have materialised, then there will be mitigation measures they'll be taking on, and so on. So there'll be various actions. So the sort of the goals in the map are always in play. It's not a sort of sequential thing that all goals are always in play. And at very least, the stakeholders in a goal will be monitoring the status of their own goal and reporting the status of their own goal, and they'll be monitoring the status of supporting goals, because they're very important. Obviously, my supporting goals are very important to me as a stakeholder in a particular goal, and they'll be monitoring the status of the map as a whole. And that status monitoring uses a traffic light system, standard traffic light stuff of red, amber and green, where green means basically everything's hunky-dory. Excuse me. Amber means there's something here that might require attention, and red means there's something here that requires action. Okay. And the way that works, the way that works is that a goal has various elements that we've already touched upon. It has factors, it has risks, it has discussion comments, which we haven't been into, but it has comments within a discussion of the goal and so on. And all of these elements have their own traffic light status, one of red, amber or green. And one of the stakeholder responsibilities is to ensure that that traffic light status of each of those elements is accurate and up to date. So the way they do that, for example, in the case of a factor, is by providing a sort of up-to-date estimate for what we're likely to achieve for that factor. Okay. So if we look at this factor, average time to handling customer inquiry, the target for that was less than 60 seconds or better. And our previous estimate was that we were likely to achieve 55 seconds for that factor. Okay. Now maybe we learned something new. We might have been having a trial run or just modelling the process or whatever. We might learn something new about this factor. So we say, well, actually now unfortunately we're saying it's likely to be 70 seconds. Now what then happens is, because the now predicted value is worse than the target value, that particular factor takes on red traffic light status. Okay. That red traffic light status propagates to the entire goal, because we're now off target for achieving the particular goal, and it propagates then from the goal that's got the problem, excuse me, through the chain and the network of supporting links to supported goals. So now we've got this situation where these goals have gone red. The fact that their outlines are red, those goals are now red traffic light status. Okay. Now, if you can imagine that you're a stakeholder in this map, and not in this customer inquiry process redesign goal, but in some other goal, like say the business benefits goal. Okay. If you can imagine you come into Pelorus to sort of look at what's going on with this particular change initiative, you can immediately see now that we have a problem here, and just by looking at this map, you can see that the source of this problem is this customer inquiry process redesign goal. Okay, so you can go down into that goal, and if you look down this jump to table at this side, you can see that the sub goals of this goal are okay, the risks are okay, the supporting goals are okay, and the discussion's okay, and the problem lies with the factors. So you can go to the factors, and by looking at the status of the factors, you can see that the problem is with average time to handle a customer inquiry, that we're now predicting 70 seconds when our target was 60 seconds. So we've got a problem, and it's the stakeholders in the map collectively who have to decide what to do about that problem. And they've basically got only three options. In the Pelorus method, there are only three options for responding to a problem. One is deferment, one is containment, and one is adjustment. And they mean roughly what they say. Deferment is basically, let's wait and see. Maybe the stakeholders in the goal that's got the problem will be able to find a way of resolving it locally, and we needn't worry about it, it's just a transient thing. Containment says, right, we recognise there's that problem, we don't want to just ignore it, but what we're going to do is contain it within a particular area of the map, so that even though we've got that problem, we don't yet know how to resolve it, we're not going to allow it to affect and infect other parts of the map. And adjustment basically means that we're going to change anything we need to change in the map. We might add goals, remove goals, change target values for factors, introduce extra, whatever it be, whatever we need to do to restore the map to harmony. And I don't have time to go into it now, but that very much relates to this sort of ongoing learning exercise of learning as we go kind of thing. So supposing in this particular case we decide that we're going to contain the map, contain the problem, and just for the sake of simplicity, I'll say we'll contain it at the goal where the problem's arisen. So I edit the map to show that I'm containing it, and now we've got this situation where we recognise we've still got a problem at customer inquiry process redesign, but basically the stakeholders in these other goals are going to say, despite the existence of that current problem, we still feel able to deliver our goals as promised. Okay, so you go through this sort of delivery process where you try and progress all the goals as and when you have the opportunity to do so, and as I say, the map really has to be designed to give you those opportunities. You try and progress the goals, you report on status and monitoring status using the traffic light system, and you gradually you achieve all the goals and you achieve your business benefits. So I've sort of covered all the basics. I mean, I emphasise I've only been sort of skating on the surface, and there's quite a lot below the surface that we haven't been into, but I've basically covered all the basics. I think the only other couple of points I'd like to make sort of in closing is first of all, the method is actually well defined. I mean, I've just been illustrating it here, but it is a well defined method that people can learn and follow. And also, returning to the purpose of Pelorus, we said at the outset that statistically your chances of succeeding with a business change initiative are less than 50%, and some people say much less than 50%. And the aim with Pelorus is to improve the probability of succeeding from less than 50% to much better than 50%. So that's what we're all about. So sorry I cantered along at such a pace, but I hope that was okay. And it gives us a bit of time for questions, so that's good.